funding is here as well. And again, we're going to talk about recording and reporting federal interest this morning. Next slide. Our agenda for today, we will have an overview, talk about just what federal recording and reporting is. We will discuss navigating the E-Plan instrument, which is now open for you. We will go through some common questions. Several of these questions were ones we had at FPI. So we've got some answers for you. We're going to go through those and we will do checks for understanding and then go through our resources and have our closing. Yep. Okay, reporting and recording federal interest. This is, of course, a federal requirement. And the regulations require LEAs who have had ESSER funded construction projects, regardless of the amount, to file an annual status report on each real property in which Ed has an interest. So you've used these federal funds, the relief funds, to do these projects, and because of such, there is a federal interest in any of the projects in which you used money for. So the additional requirement is that projects funded by ESSER in the amount of $1 million or more must also record a notice of federal interest in the official real property records in the jurisdiction where you are located. Next slide. The why. According to Ed, these requirements will help ensure that a facility can continue to be used for the educational purposes after the grant has ended. It also establishes the level of public investment in that facility that may be recouped if the property is transferred to private ownership. And it also promotes non-discrimination, including accessibility, while the property is used for the grant's educational purposes. So what is federal interest? Essentially, it refers to the portion of the property's value that is attributable to federal funding. So there is a percentage of the federal participation. This is the ratio of the federal funds that was used in the total cost of the property or the improvements made to the property. The current fair market value. This is the present value of the property considering the improvements that have been made. And you can see we have linked the Code of Federal Regulations there if you would like to click on that and read those. So real property, what is that? That is any land, including any improvements, the structures, but it does exclude anything that is movable. So this means it is things like, I know handrails was used as an example, things that are permanently established there. If you could pick it up and go or roll it out or easily move it, that is something that would not be counted. And you can see we've got a few examples there of things that could be movable equipment. So what does this mean for you? So did your LEA use ESSER funds on a renovation, major remodeling, construction, or actually purchasing property? If the answer is yes, then you must file the annual report on the status of each of these properties in which Ed has an interest. If the answer is no, then you do not have to do reporting or recording of federal interest. And a question that we had all along is, what if you use these federal funds and combine them with other funding? The answer is still yes. Regardless of the amount of federal funds used, you do have to do the reporting. Okay, so recording, what does this mean for your LEA? Did the individual project cost 1 million or more? If the answer is yes, then there is the recording requirement. So you must record the notice of federal interest in the official real property records in the jurisdiction where you are located, or where that property is located. If it did not total $1 million, the answer is no. But there are some caveats here, and there's a few examples that we have listed. So like if the property cost $1.5 million and you use 900,000 of federal funds, then that is something that should be recorded. So again, there are just some examples. There are some instances in which you might have to record even if you were under the $1 million threshold. Next slide. So how to record a notice of federal interest? There is no specific form. And since they must be filed where the facility is located, we recommend that you contact your local register of deeds or other applicable government office to determine what must be provided. There is an asterisk there. We were able to find a couple of samples for some notice of federal interest, and we do have those linked in our resources. So those are there if you would just like to look at something that has been used before. So to report the federal interest, there's a minimum of 2 reports. There is a cover page that is required, and then the real property status report, attachment A, that is required. And if you have multiple properties, you may have to do that report, of course, more than once for each of the properties. So there's a third form, and we are including it here, even though it is only to be used if there is a disposition. And hopefully no one will have that with any of these type of ESSER funded properties, but we do have that linked as well. Okay, so how will you do this? We do have the forms, of course, those were linked on the previous slide, but we do have also some just boxes that need to be checked, and then of course those reports will need to be uploaded. So this instrument, again, it is open. As of today, it is open. It's in data and information in ePlan under 2025, ESSER recording and reporting federal interest. So you must attest to the following: whether or not you use the funds in part or whole for construction, remodeling, renovation, or real property. And then also whether or not you had a project totaling 1 million or more funded by ESSER. If you did, there is an assurance there for you to check that that has been recorded. And then there is also a location for you to upload the report forms. So it's open today. It is due no later than December 20th. How often do you have to do this? LEAs or other subgrantees must annually report on the status of a renovation, major remodeling, construction, or real property for at least the first 15 years after a project is funded and for which federal interest is retained. Now Julia is going to go through the section to help you with navigating the ePlan instrument.
Thank you, Jerry Beth. We're going to walk through what this looks like in ePlan. And as Jerry Beth mentioned, it is available today, so you can start working in the instrument. You will first go to the data and information section, so where you would generally go to for ESSER F, for pre-approvals, and you'll select fiscal year 2025. And under there, you'll see the ESSER reporting and recording federal interest section. So from there, you'll click Drive Started, as you do with all of your other ePlan instruments, and you'll go straight to the cover page where you'll just complete all of the sections that you're used to completing, the LEA information, director of schools, and the ESSER point of contact. Excuse me. The next section is where we get into the meat of the instrument. And I will say this instrument is much shorter than some of our other tools that we've used for other requirements. So on the reporting and recording page, you'll select yes or no to each question that's listed. Jerry Beth mentioned these questions previously. There are really two main questions that need to be answered on this page. And then depending on the response to each of those questions, that's going to determine how you would respond to the follow-up questions. So the first one is just, did you use ESSER 2 or 3 funds in part or whole for construction, remodeling, renovation, or real property? So of course, that's just a yes or no. If it's no, then the answer to your next question will also be no, because you did not use ESSER funds for any of those things. You would essentially click no to both of those and you're done. You submit at that point because you don't have to upload any documents. If you're on this call, then you probably more than likely have some ESSER funded construction projects. So you would select yes for the first question. And the second question is, did you have at least one project that totaled $1 million or more that's funded by ESSER 2 or 3? So that's where the recording requirement comes in. If you did not, just click no, go to the next section. If you did, you will have to attest and assure that any of those projects that were $1 million or more have been recorded with your local jurisdiction. You don't have to upload the notice of federal interest, but we do recommend that you keep that on file in your LEA for future monitoring and oversight purposes. So then you'll go to the related documents section, and this is where you'll actually upload the reports. You'll need to make sure you upload all the required documentation. And of course, we know that there are those two required reports, the cover page and then attachment A. And like Jerry Beth mentioned, if you have multiple projects to report, then you may have multiple forms to upload. And then, of course, there is also the link for attachment C, which most of us probably will not have to worry about if there was a disposition. The links are embedded in the instrument. These are in multiple places. I think we've put them everywhere we could possibly think of. But they go straight to the page, to the website where you can download the PDFs and complete them before uploading them to ePlan. And additionally, when you go to that page, there are instructions for each specific form, and there's also definitions that help clarify a few things as well on the page where those documents are located. So when you have gotten to that point, have you made sure that all the cover page sections have been completed? It's funny because we do see that section not completed quite often, and it's very easy to forget. So making sure that all of those have been done. Did you respond to each question in reporting and recording? Did you complete the necessary assurances? Upload all of your documentation? And then, of course, has everyone at the LEA reviewed and approved the instrument, everyone who's necessary? So we often see things that have been approved by a few of the required personnel, and they may just be sitting and waiting for one more person. And so just as a reminder, it has to be submitted as LEA authorized representative approved before we will get a notification. And that must be done on or before December 20th. So the instrument itself is pretty simple. It's pretty short and self-explanatory, but we do have quite a few questions that have come up. We have created an FAQ and a quick guide that are in TDOE resources. But we had some additional questions come up during FPI and just along the way as people are learning more about this requirement. So we'll add to those as we have more questions, and we'll also have time for questions at the end. So if you have questions that have popped up along the way, we may answer them through the remainder of our time, but feel free just to, you can type those in the chat or just write it down and have it ready, and we will have time to take some questions when we get to the end of the presentation. So one question that has come up a lot is, what if there were multiple projects in one building? So for example, you have a building with 3 separate projects. None of them were over $1 million individually, but if you combine them, they were. So would you need to record the notice of federal interest or not? So the guidance says that projects of $1 million or more, but the NFI, the Notice of Federal Interest reporting requirements, only ask for the award number and property identification. So we reached out to Brewman to get some further clarification on some of these requirements. And because Ed and the Department of Labor have been critical about breaking projects down in order to avoid that Davis-Bacon requirement, we would apply that same logic here. So if you have multiple projects all on one property and they're all paid for with ESSER, if they total $1 million or more together, then we recommend you record it just to avoid any potential findings. So it's kind of a better safe than sorry situation. We lean towards recording because it's really more about the total value that's credited to the federal government, to Ed. This was another question we had come up quite a bit. And this may be for different projects, but HVAC was one that was mentioned often. So for example, if your LEA had multiple HVAC projects all across the district, would you need to do separate reports, so those required reporting documents for each building, or could you do one report since they were all under one contract? So this one is, there's a little flexibility here. The NFI guidance, the Notice of Federal Interest guidance, breaks it down by property. So we have taken the position that each property represents a different project, and so it could be considered separately. However, combining projects that are not on the same property, so for example, you have HVAC at 4 different schools, even under one contract, combining those projects that are not on one property may make it more difficult to respond to some of those questions within the reports. So that is kind of one of those LEA discretion answers, but that's just something to keep in mind, that if you do combine those, it could make it a little more difficult to answer some of those additional questions. A few other ones that we've had come up. One was, if an LEA used a combination of funds, and Jerry Beth mentioned this previously, so you maybe use state and local funds in addition to ESSER funds for a project, do you still have to report that? And the answer of that is yes. This reporting requirement, those 2 documents that have to be uploaded, that applies if federal funds in any amount were used. So that it doesn't matter how much, that still applies. And this was one that came up. So I know a lot of districts do not have charter schools, but we do have some that do. And this was one that we had to get some clarification on. So if your LEA had a charter school that used ESSER funds for a capital project, who is the responsible party for recording and reporting for those schools? And the LEA is the one that will be responsible for recording and reporting any of those projects that ESSER funds were used for in the charter schools. We're going to go through a few checks for understanding and share some resources, and then we will take some time. I think we have a good bit of time left to answer any additional questions that you all may have moving forward. So you can type your response in the chat, and we'll see how well we've done. The first question is, how many reports are required for LEAs? A2, B3, C4, or none are required. They're just recommended. See some answers coming in. The correct answer is A. It's 2 that are required. There is that additional third report if you had a disposition, but most LEAs probably do not. So it's really just those 2 required reports that have to be completed and uploaded. Where and by what date should LEAs upload the reports to ePlan for federal interest? So is it the LEA document library by September 30th? I hope not, because that date has passed. Is it the LEA document library by December 20th? Data and information by December 20th? Or email to your relief funding coordinator by December 20th? Hopefully I gave you a hint as to at least what the date is. I see lots of C's coming in. Yes, that is under data and information, and that needs to be done on or before December 20th. Excuse me. LEAs with projects over $1 million are required to file a notice of federal interest. Is that true or false? Yes, that is true. If you have a project over $1 million, you do have to record that notice of federal interest. The form for filing a notice of federal interest, an NFI, is in the ePlan instrument. Is that true or false? This one may be a little tricky. Okay. It's false. So there is not a specific form that is provided to record an NFI. Those have to be filed in the jurisdiction that your facility is located. So you'll have to contact your Register of Deeds, your courthouse, other applicable government office to determine what you have to provide in order to record that notice of federal interest. And Jerry Beth mentioned previously, excuse me, that we have linked some sample NFIs that we were able to find in our resources section, so you can at least get an idea of what that may require and what that may look like. But again, there's not a specific form that has been provided that has to be used. You also do not have to upload the notice of federal interest to ePlan, but you do have to make sure that you check that assurance that it has been recorded, and you'll need to keep that on file within your LEA. The reporting and recording requirement has to be completed for at least the first A, 5 years, B, 7 years, C, 10, or D, 15. It is D, the first 15 years. I don't know how many of us will still be around at that time, but whoever's there will have to do that for the first 15 years. All right, so we have an example here, Samantha. Your LEA has 3 buildings with HVAC projects, and each of those projects cost $400,000. Do those projects have to be reported? Yes or no? That's the first part. Do they have to be recorded? Yes or no? I'll give you a second to think about that one. So for the first question, does it have to be reported? Yes. Any project, it doesn't matter what it costs, has to be reported. Does it have to be recorded? It does not have to be recorded because none of those projects are over $1 million. They're all at different properties. So you do not have to record those. I did see somebody that said possibly. And so I think, if you're in a situation where you have an HVAC project that's $400,000 at your property, at one property, and maybe you have some other things at that property that total $1 million altogether. I have mentioned earlier, we would recommend recording because the total projects at the property total that $1 million. But if this is it, if you just have these projects, they're separate, they're at different properties, and none of them are $1 million or more, you do not have to record the notice of federal interest for those. I'm going to hand it back to Jerry Beth to share some resources and close us out, and then we will take some time to answer any additional questions that have popped up along the way.
Thank you, Julia. And as we have both mentioned, we have several things linked in our resources. And at the top, you can see where to go in TDOE resources to find things that we are putting that pertain just to recording and reporting. But they are also linked here. We have the quick guide, which basically goes over again what to do in the ePlan instrument. Our FAQ is there, and we will be updating that as we get questions. We'll try to do weekly or bi-weekly, depending on what questions we get. We've also put the guidance from Ed. The actual reporting forms are linked there as well. And I will say a couple of things about that. The links take you to the site where the reports are. They are fillable PDF forms, so we can't link directly to them. So you go to the site and you find the form and download it. And I do know that I had some issues at first, and I've had a couple of questions from people too. Sometimes when you download those forms, it says that they can't open and you need a newer version of Adobe or something like that. What I did was just save the form to my computer, and then it opened, and it opened correctly. I have no idea why, but that's what I did. So, and I will say as well, where those forms are, there are instructions for each of the forms that are on that site as well. And it goes through each question on the forms with instructions. And I think those are really helpful and can help answer some of your questions as you are completing these. And then the final two resources we have, those are ones that we mentioned. Those were the sample notices of federal interest that we found. So you can check those out and see if that's something that helps you with that section as well. And here is our map. As I'm sure many of you know, it is just Julia and I on the relief team, and you can look at that very colorful map and see who which of us represents you or is assigned to you. But I think many of you know, if you reach out to either of us, we will help you out and get you pointed in the right direction. And there are the LEAs listed in order. And there, of course, is our contact information. And as always, we would love your feedback. Please feel free to fill out the survey and let us know. And because we especially want to know things if we do not do well and how we can help you better. So please take a minute to do that. And that will conclude our presentation for this morning, but we do have plenty of time to answer some questions. And there, of course, is the fraud, waste, or abuse slide and phone number. If you are aware of any of that going on, there's how you can report. But we will